Chair of Southampton Preston Park Residents Association, and I'm an architect by profession. I contributed a counter to the feasibility report. I think there are three key points. I think schools use is a red herring, because on Clorland East we've had 1,200 new school places in the last 5 years. So the school is going to use what people are going to travel to by car. The site is too small for a school and will have to be managed remotely by a school from another place, to the detriment of pupils and the school. I hear the last person's remarks. The investment strategy is quite clear. It doesn't need any high intelligence. We have a building on the site that works. The proposal is to knock it down and replace it with exactly the same building plus housing, which means that the housing is very expensive because the only income or the only value resulting is the value of the houses, which I've demonstrated are not affordable in the current climate, and somebody else has demonstrated that the rents are not affordable for social housing use, which I believe can be incorporated on the site, and there can be a scheme which retains the existing building and has housing use on the library site. But unfortunately, whoever briefed the person who made the report, he didn't give them that option. And finally, I've spoken to the owner of the garage, who's a member of our organisation, and he's quite adamant that he's not willing to sell. He's a little bit upset that values to his side, and the presumption that he would sell goes into the public domain without a detailed case being presented to him. He's provided a service which is very popular amongst many of the Asian residents who use this facility for car maintenance, and he simply asked me if I'm going to move or how I'm going to go. Thank you.
Thank you, Brent. Thanks very much. I will try to be brief. What you said about the new community libraries policy does actually seem to be a significant change in policy, but unfortunately it's quite short on detail, and it would have been interesting to have a bit more detail, and specifically it would be interesting to have a bit more detail about precisely how that policy would guarantee our future in the building. On the subject of the new licence, I'm actually pretty resigned to us getting what you've said. However, I just want to note that all 6 Barnhill and Preston councillors have written to you asking for a 12-month licence and saying that they think it's perfectly reasonable for reasons I've given at some length, and I still think it's perfectly reasonable. I'm pleased that you've said that you're not expecting PCL to pay a rent of £51,000. What I want is to pay a rent, but I think you have to make it clear to officers, particularly if you're going to ask them to rewrite this report, that the financial considerations about any new build will have to take into account that we're not paying £51,000 a year in rent. So moving on to what I wanted to say about the report. I've said to you in writing that I think in general political parties should aim to keep their election promises, and it's obvious why that is. If Paul Lauder or Sarah Taylor or one remaining Lieutenant Councillor were here, they'd be able to explain to you precisely why political parties should keep their promises. And a clear promise was made to offer the existing building at a Pt2 rent for use as a library without competitive tender. And we built a really fantastic library on the basis of those promises. I'm not, because I've done it at least twice before, going to go through a long list of the things that we do in the library. Jean and Pat have touched on some of them, and I'm extremely grateful for their contribution. But I have asked the Chief Executive if there is any legal obstacle to those promises being met should the Cabinet wish to go forward with that. And although she's replying to me that there are obstacles, it seems to me from her reply that they're not obstacles which are insurmountable. She wrote to me that there is some ability to offer properties at less than best value, and she also wrote that it would be open to Cabinet to direct officers to explore a different use of all or part of the building. Now, that may seem like a statement of the obvious, but it's not something that happens very much in this room. Are there precedents for what we're asking for? I think there are probably quite a few. One that springs to mind in this borough is the Elms Gardens allotments, which a mere 3 years ago which had, I think, been earmarked for housing, which were turned over to residents to pay for rent. And I think, I'm absolutely certain, that if we were to look at libraries in other boroughs where across the country a huge number of libraries have been turned over to voluntary groups, we would find situations where this applies, either because, as Michael suggested, there is a coherent strategy to bring voluntary libraries into the library system, or also, more importantly, as in the case of, for example, Prime Barnet Library, where it is just a one-off library that has been given a building because of particular circumstances. We have built a really fantastic facility, which is right at the heart of the Preston Road Barnhill community. We've got, I'm not sure actually, about 600 members. I had a look, because I'm actually responsible for coordinating volunteers at the moment, I had a look at our recent records. We've had, in the last 3 months, 48 people actually working in the library, doing work for us, staffing us. That is a huge achievement. We are really deeply embedded in the community. We want to keep the existing building. Michael, I think, has raised significant questions about the proposed development. We do want to keep the existing building, as was promised. But if we're not going to keep the existing building, you really have to ask officers to go away and rewrite sections on tendering and rental income so that the report is consistent with the promises that were made 2 years ago. And if you do that, we will be able to run Preston Community Library. I'm hopeful that we will, if nothing else, get a very clear steer from you today that in 2 years' time, 3 years' time, 5 years' time, Preston Community Library will be running on that site. Thanks very much.
Thank you. I'm speaking in my capacity as lead member for libraries. And first of all, I just wanted to make a small point of clarification about the report itself. It repeatedly describes the Preston Community Library as a pop-up library. Well, if you go to Walton Green Station at the moment, you'll see a pop-up library which is courageously operated by Cricklewood, and it's a couple of bookcases by the ticket barrier. Preston is not a public library, it's a really high volume. And it's also a really valued partner of Brent Council's library service, so it's very much part of the wider Brent family. They run excellent services for the community. I visited, I think twice, but certainly had one extended visit, and I saw everything from ESOL classes to a community reading of Tennyson. So I think it was, I'm not sure if it was Councillor Hussain or Harrison who talked about reaching out to all parts of the community. That's absolutely definitely what I saw in that building. Turning to the report, I personally strongly welcome the redevelopment of the site. I think that much more could be done with that site, and if it's possible to redevelop the two sites in conjunction, I think that would be ideal. I don't see a trade-off between redeveloping the site and having a thriving community library, and I think that Cricklewood in particular offers a really encouraging example of how the two can go hand in hand. I think the pledges you've made tonight, Chair, extending the licence is very, very welcome, and I particularly support the proposed community library strategy. But in the interest of that strategy, there's three parts of this report that I think would really benefit from a much clearer steer. The first is that during the inevitable transition during the construction period, I think we should give a clear commitment to support Preston Community Library so they don't fall between the gap between the two buildings. Secondly, I think that there should be a clear commitment given to weight the procurement process very, very strongly to social value rather than financial value, so we can capture the good work done in terms of involving volunteers and reaching out to community education work. And thirdly, I think there should be a clear commitment given that the 50,000 rent need not be cash-based, but could be an equivalent amount through social value. So either, as Councillor Harrison said, we withdraw the sections of the report that cover the tender process pending clarification, or as Mr. Bromwell said, we direct a much clearer steer. I think that the redevelopment proposal should definitely go forward, but we can make the tender processes much better.
Absolutely, we can do that, that's not an issue. Anything else? Ellie?
Thank you, Chair. I too spent possibly the most fun afternoon I've had since joining Cabinet at Preston Library. I don't represent the ward, but I do live 5 minutes away. So, and on that afternoon recognised what others have said about the diversity of the community, and I just particularly wanted to flag the ESOL provision, which, you know, for people who need the support to learn English, to access services and all that is you know, very, very difficult to come by nowadays, and so it's an incredibly vital service. In terms of the report, I wanted to echo Councillor Pavey's comments about the procurement process and the flexibility we have to develop a tendering process that respects social value, firstly, but also that recognises the role of community libraries in our life as a borough, and also around the rent in kind, or whatever the appropriate wording is, that recognises the value of volunteers, the value of services like ESOL. I also wanted to add to that part of the tender process that we put out needs to be really, really clear about what the community space is. So what I don't want to see happen further down the line is that we receive development plans that suddenly suggest that in order to be viable as flats or whatever, the community space has to be so small or inappropriate, such that it makes a nonsense of the commitments that we've made and the commitments that I think colleagues here absolutely want to protect and deliver. So I really hope through the tender process we can be very, very clear that the space comes first, the development would be welcome, but that it must protect a space that is appropriate and can be used by an organisation like the Preston Road Library.